Center Development Agency meeting to order. City Recorder Kreger, please call roll.
Mayor Lube,
Here.
Councilor Robbins,
Here.
Councilor Slack,
Here.
Councilor Shaw,
Here.
Council President Wolf,
Here.
Councilor Godusi,
Present.
Councilor Hu.
Here.
Thank you. If everyone will please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, everyone. The first item on our agenda is a proclamation for Jazz Hands Day, which is not something I ever thought would come out of my mouth, but this is a fun thing to celebrate. We have Digital Communications Coordinator Barrientos and Meredith Gordon and team from Broadway Rose Theater Company here. Please come on up. I have heard there is an appropriate way to do jazz hands, and perhaps you're here to teach us. I'm very excited about that. Excellent.
Good evening, Mayor Lube, council, and community members. Thank you for your time tonight. My name is Leandro Barrientos, Chair of the Equity Advisory Committee and Tigard's Bilingual Digital Communications Coordinator. I'm here to present and help us all remember the importance of Jazz Hands Day. At first glance, proclaiming a Jazz Hands Day might seem lighthearted, but it carries a meaningful depth. Jazz is a uniquely American art form born from the Black experience. It's improvisation, resistance, survival, and ultimately freedom. Our recent celebration of Juneteenth reminds us that equity is the work of ensuring those freedoms are realized and not just promised. Theater has long served as a forum for bold expression and place of refuge, especially for the LGBTQIA+ community. Icons like Bob Fosse, who just celebrated a birthday yesterday, popularized jazz hands movement, not just for flair, but to reflect the complexities of joy, identity, and justice. So yes, Jazz Hands Day is fun, but fun and equity are not opposites. Joy is a form of liberation. And tonight we celebrate movement, expression, and belonging. Just as we did last month with Move with the Mayor, we encourage Tigard community members to remember to have levity and to sometimes not take things so seriously, to remember to move and have fun. And I am so thrilled to be joined by Broadway Rose Theater Company to help us mark this proclamation and to show us all, and primarily council, how to do a proper jazz hand.
Hi, my name is Meredith Gordon. I think I've met most of you. I'm the executive director at Broadway Rose. I'd like to introduce Blythe Woodland and Natalie Harris from our marketing team. But like most staff at our theater, we all have a background in performance. You might call us jazz hands experts. So I want to thank you all for having us here today. We can all agree that there's a lot of turbulence going on in this world and that it's nice to have a diversion from the day-to-day. That's what art provides, because it can help us explore complicated feelings and it can help us escape them. So I would be remiss if I did not mention our production of Waitress, which does that for this community. We open this Friday and we run through July 20th. We hope that you all will take a chance and come see the great work that we're doing. You can get tickets on our website. So we are strong because you see and understand the importance of a thriving theater in your community. It is because of you that our jazz hands are strong. So I'd like to invite you all to stand with Natalie, Blythe, and me. We come with costumes. And Blythe is going to give you further instruction.
Okay, so while I can teach you the mechanics of a jazz hand, the most important thing to remember is that everybody's jazz hand is going to look a little different. So I encourage you all to put your own razzle-dazzle, per se, on your jazz hand. So with your hands stretched out to the sides, fingers spread nicely apart. Very nice, very nice. Everybody love it. And you are going to give your hands and your fingers just a little shimmy shake. Very, very nice. There we go. Jazz hands can be done in opposite directions. They can be done forward.
Yes. Big smiles are encouraged.
So all together, I will give us a 5, 6, 7, 8, and then on 1, we will all display our jazz hands, and we will give them our own little razzle dazzle. So hands at your sides, and 5, 6, 7, 8, jazz hands. You've got it. You are all hired.
Thank you so much, councilors and mayor. Oh! Yeah. With the jazz hands. Oh, keep the gloves on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course. Keep them on. Oh, yeah. Jazz hands on. Of course. Yeah. Where did he go? Can you tell us where?
Okay.
I assume we have to have our hands up or out.
I don't know who's taking the official city picture, but I have Leandra's phone, so. Very cute.
Thank you for being here. That was so fun. I look forward to using proper jazz hands technique in the future. The next item on our agenda is public comment. If you'd like to call in or testify by video, please do so now to get into the queue. The phone number is 503-966-4101. Anyone wishing to comment in person, there is a sign-up sheet at the front of the room, and please do so. There is 2 minutes for public comment. Please let us know your name if you want to let us know what you're representing, and then your hometown, where you live. That would be greatly appreciated. And there is going to be a timer on the screen that will show your 2 minutes. We did receive 2 written public comments today, or by noon yesterday. The first is from Megan DeSalvo, the Tigard Chamber of Commerce, regarding the Tigard parking program, and the other is from Kristen Leichner, supporting option 1 for the potential fees item on the agenda for solid waste management. We do have multiple people signed up in person, and so the first person is Megan DeSalvo. Please come on up and turn on the microphone. There's a button at the front, and the microphone will turn green. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Megan DeSalvo. I'm a resident of Tigard. I own a business in Tigard, and I'm the CEO of the Tigard Chamber of Commerce. And tonight, I am here to express our concern about the direction of the parking management program. For years, businesses along 72nd, Bevelin Street, and downtown Tigard have voiced their concerns about the program, and the concerns remain unaddressed. Despite repeated feedback sessions, emails, many of our members have told us that they feel that there's a lack of transparency in their feedback that's been given and how decisions have been made. We are not opposed to managing parking, but we are opposed to doing it in a way that prioritizes theoretical models over real impact. The proposed enforcement plans risk driving away the very people we're trying to attract in these revitalized areas. We want to see local shoppers, diners, patients, clients. We want them to be vibrant in these cores. We ask that council pause tonight and listen and work with the business community on an alternative approach, such as 4-hour parking zones in key areas of concern, or a targeted permit-based system that would allow for permitted overstays that are approved for our employees. Advancing a one-size-fits-all plan does not fit our current business climate. The one that was proposed to you for this plan was from 2017, which was pre-COVID. We're asking tonight for collaboration, not conflict, and we thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. The next person signed up is Kyle Knepper. Welcome, Kyle.
Good evening, everyone. I am Kyle Knepper, the Executive Director of the Tigard Downtown Alliance and a resident of Tigard. I would just like to echo Megan DeSalvo's comments and just express some of the feedback that I've received from our downtown businesses. Many of them don't feel that really there is a current problem that needs to be addressed. However, there is a very real need to look to the future with all the redevelopment and hopeful growth that the downtown area is expected to see over the next 2 to 5 to 10 years. We think there really will be a parking problem, and there doesn't seem to be a plan in place to address it then. So I think many of the businesses would like to see a plan put forward that will outline the steps taken, so when the issue does arise years to come, that there is no, oh, we didn't see this problem coming, because we do see the problem coming, but we think we have time to address it. So that's where we would like to see the parking plan go from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. The next person signed up is Whitney Bautista. Welcome, Whitney.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. I am Whitney Green Bautista. I'm a licensed acupuncturist. I own a business in the Tigard Triangle. I started my business in 2016. Well, I started my business in Lake Oswego, but moved to the Tigard Triangle in 2016. I love Tigard. I grew up in Tigard, and I was so committed to Tigard that I purchased a building to hopefully continue to practice in Tigard for the rest of my career. I'm very concerned about the 2-hour parking limitations. Myself, since having a child, this will make me emotional. I have limitations with how far I can walk, and I'm so emotional about this because I have a staff member that is concerned she won't be able to work for me if we have 2-hour parking restrictions and we're having to walk far distances to get to the office. We save our current parking spots for our patients because our patients are seeing us because they're in pain. A lot of them have limitations. They can't ride a bike, they can't walk far distances, and they need a close distance to receive the care that they need. Since COVID, it has been very hard for medical practices. I have lots of colleagues that have had to shut down their businesses, and the Tigard Triangle supports a lot of medical pediatric care, optometrists, multiple therapy offices, and not all of us can do telehealth. We need patients to be able to come in and see us, and we have a parking issue. We all know this, but this is not a solution, and it's really going to be hard on our business, and I really want to be able to stay in Tigard. So thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry I got emotional. Thank you.
Thank you, Whitney. The next person signed up is Alvin Bautista. Welcome, Alvin.
Good evening, council members. My name is Dr. Alvin Bautista, and I'm an owner of Pinnacle Chiropractic Wellness, a business locally here in Tigard Triangle, and we moved there in 2021. I also proudly serve on the TCAC, and I'm engaged member of our community. I'm here to express concern about the proposed parking enforcement measure for the Tigard Triangle in the downtown areas. While it's well-intended, implementing stricter parking regulations or time limits might unintentionally harm small businesses such as mine and my wife's business, causing additional, make it even more difficult for the patients, as she said, to get to our clinic. We already have patients that cannot walk up the stairs, and we have to use the our downstairs area to serve them. And it may discourage patient or people in general to come to our part of the city here in Tigard Triangle, making it more difficult, more competitive for small businesses. We serve numerous individuals with physical limitations who cannot walk long distances, including from the street parking to our clinic doors. When parking is unavailable nearby, these patients are at risk that may be missing or delaying their care. And last thing we want is if I see, let's say for you, Dr. Lube, at 3 p.m., hey, I gotta repark my car, so that's eating part of your treatment time already, and we are already kind of on time restrictions already. Small business in Tigard Triangle depend on accessible, flexible parking for staff and patients alike. If the goal is to reduce long-term parking or increase turnover, I respectfully urge the council to consider alternative that won't place added burden on healthcare and services-based business. We are proud to contribute to Tigard's economic and community development, and we support responsible growth, but it must be equitable, thoughtful, and inclusive for the whole Tigard Triangle. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. The next person signed up, I'm unsure if this is a G or an E starting with a name, so it's either Elsie Barron or Guys Barron. And she was going to be here, but she's wrapping up with a patient. She's not here, so Excellent. Is it a G or an E, just for my curiosity? E. Okay. That was initially what I thought, and then I was like, well, it could be a G, so thank you. Is there anyone who didn't sign up that was intending for public comment? Okay, thank you so much for providing comment. The next item, Mr. Wold, are there any phone callers in the queue or anyone wishing to testify by video today?
Mayor, there are no callers in the queue and no requests for a video comment.
All right, thank you so much. We will now move to the city manager report. I know, it moved quickly, came at you.
So, Mayor and Council, I do have a slide up on the screen so you can read along with me. But what I wanted to do is share with you this week a message received from a community member who said, I have been wanting to write an appreciation for the children's librarians. The children's section at the Tigard Library is a great and safe place for our family. My son has some special needs, ADHD, sensory issues, etc. When he is overwhelmed, he sometimes does surprising things. The library and story time are so welcoming, well organized, and well structured that I rarely see any behaviors from him there. Even if he struggled there, I feel really at ease knowing the children's librarians understand children and are inclusive of children with special needs. The librarians always remember us and say hello to my son. We've been able to read hundreds of books since he was born due to the library. When he turned 5 this week, I asked him what he wanted to do on his birthday, and he said, go to the library. I have so much gratitude for this service in our community. So thank you for the opportunity to share this message from one of our parents in our community. Thanks.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a public hearing to consider a resolution authorizing water revenue refunding bonds. I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify by phone or video, please call in or log in now to get into the queue. The phone number is 503-966-4101. And we have Assistant Finance Director McClung to present the staff report. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Lube, members of council. My name is Keith McClung. I'm the Assistant Finance Director for the city. Thank you for having me. The resolution before you tonight is seeking your approval to seek a bond refunding related to our 2015 bond issuance within the water department. The reason we're doing it now is we can basically, there's a call option at 10 years and we can refinance if the interest rate markets are favorable. And so that's what we're attempting to do here. I believe one of the council's questions was what rate are we anticipating or hoping? The estimate is if today we issued those bonds, it would be about 4.62%. So, in 2 months' time when they do sell, those things might change, but we're not anticipating any significant fluctuations that would move that rate.
Thank you. There were no written public comments received by noon on Monday. Mr. Wold, are there any phone callers in the queue or anyone wishing to testify by video?
Mayor, no callers in the queue and no requests for a video comment.
Thank you. We don't have anyone signed up in person. And so I will ask the council, do you have any questions on this item before we close the public hearing and move to deliberations? Okay. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and now there is council consideration of resolution number 25-25. Questions or comments?
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 25-25.
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, will the city recorder read the number and title of the resolution?
Resolution number 25-25. A resolution of the City of Tigard, Washington County, Oregon, authorizing the sale of water system revenue refunding bonds and related matters.
Thank you. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Resolution 25-25 is adopted by unanimous vote of the Center Development Agency. The next item on the agenda is a Town Center Development Agency consideration of a resolution authorizing bonds for capital projects in the Tigard Triangle. And we have Assistant Director McClung and Community Development Director Kirkman here. Welcome to you both.
Slight change in plans. Finance Director King here, stepping in. Good evening, TCDA Chair and board members. For the record, my name is Eric King, Finance Director, and joining me here,
Sambo Kirkman, Community Development Director.
the resolution being brought before you today is to authorize a new issuance of debt for $5.6 million to acquire the former Regal Cinema site that Council authorized on May 27th, 2025. This borrowing is only backed by increment revenue, and it is a new issuance for the Tigard Triangle District. As part of the funding stack discussed on May 27th, staff had proposed using borrowing proceeds of $5 million to fund the project, and staff is bringing forward a proposal of $5.6 million, which is $600,000 more than the proceed amount. This amount represents borrowing costs, acquisition costs, as well as a small contingency. While it is unlikely that we need to tap into any contingency, if council is comfortable with this number, it would authorize staff to proceed with the borrowing and with the transaction without having to return to council and prevent any further delays. With that, I am happy to answer any questions. Also available on the line is our financial advisor, Duncan Brown, who is also available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the Finance Director or Community Development Director? Other than this is an exciting next step. Council President?
I was going to just read the motion and then I got lost on the I move to approve TCDA resolution number 25-02.
I second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the city recorder please read the number and title of the resolution?
Town Center Development Agency Resolution Number 25-02. A resolution authorizing indebtedness for capital projects described in the Tigard Triangle Urban Renewal Plan.
Thank you. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, TCDA Resolution Number 25-02 is adopted by unanimous vote of the board. I will now reconvene the Tigard City Council for the rest of the meeting. The next item on our agenda is to discuss solid waste franchise fees and charges aggregate report. For that, we have the Assistant Finance Director McClung to give the staff report, and we also have our consultant Chris Bell, who will give us a slide presentation. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Lube, council members. For the record, my name is Keith McClung, Assistant Finance Director for the city. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm joined by Chris Bell of Bell & Associates. Mr. Bell was contracted to do a rate study based on the results of the haulers for FY24. Before I turn it over to Mr. Bell, I'd like to provide some background for why we are in front of council tonight and ultimately the guidance we're seeking. Every March, the waste haulers are required to submit their annual financial results, and staff reviews those results, and we determine what the composite or the blended rate of return is. If that rate falls below 8%, a rate study is triggered. If it falls within the 8 to 12%, we still apply an increase, but it's a staggered CPI increase based on whether it's from 8 to 9%, 9 to 10, and so on. Again, if it falls higher than 12%, again, we would do a rate study to bring those rates back in line. So for this year, the blended or composite rate was 7.78%. And so that triggers a rate study. If it were 8% or higher, it would be a CPI increase. And so what that rate increase or review is designed to do is reset the composite rate to a 10% profitability line. So that's what you're going to see tonight as far as the options. Those options will get us to a 10% forecasted return. And so that's per code. So Tigard Municipal Code 11.04090 states that if the blended or composite rate falls outside the 8 to 12% rate of return, a rate study is triggered to determine the adjustments needed to bring the forecasted composite rate back to 10%. If the blended rate falls within the 8 to 12%, a staggered CPI is applied. So for tonight, Mr. Bell will be presenting the results of the rate review, and will also present 2 options for council consideration. We're seeking guidance from council on how to proceed with either one of those. Sure.
Could you please, for the audience, explain CPI?
Yeah, it basically
What it stands for?
Yeah, it stands for Consumer Price Index, and it's a annual or national rate that gets increased, and it measures inflation and cost.
Can I just ask a question? Are we using the CPI for the western states, or are we using the nationwide one?
CPIW.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, we're not applying the CPI rate for this because it did fall out of that 8 to 12%. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Bell. I'd also like to point out that representatives from both waste haulers are available and anticipate questions.
A lot of questions. So, Mayor Loeb, council members, thank you for having me here again. It seems like this is getting to be an annual event, despite having this CPI adjustment. Again, this year, when we looked at the composite rates, the reported amount was 7.98. It was just a fraction under 8%, but there were some adjustments made for franchise fees, and it brought that down to the lower rate. Can I get the next slide, please? So again, the Tigard franchise, for the people that are new to this, the garbage collection is provided in the city of Tigard by 2 franchise collection companies, Pride Disposal and Waste Management. And of the 2 companies, Pride has a little bit bigger collection area and a higher customer count for both residential and commercial customers. The counts that were reported this year for residential is just under 15,000 customers receiving service, and just a little over 1,200 commercial customers receiving garbage and collection services from both providers. And again, the composite was 7.78. At that point, it kicks in the rate review. Worked quite a bit with Keith, going back and forth on different rate scenarios and different possibilities for the rate adjustments, which will be presented here. Next slide, please. And this right here is the breakout of the exclusive territories that each one of the service providers collects within that area. And you can see Waste Management, but adjoins up there in the city of Beaverton, which they have the routes cross over, and same with Pride Disposal has the lower areas south of the city of Tigard. Next slide, please. So again, the adjusted rate of return for the composite for the 3 levels of service came at a 7.78, but you can see the breakout for the individual service. And cart collection service is primarily residential, container services primarily commercial, and drop box is a combination of commercial, industrial, and occasional people who need a drop box. So for example, if you're doing a remodel, you may get a drop box for services. And these are the respective rates that were reported, or excuse me, adjusted for the 2004 calendar year. Next slide, please. 2024. I'm sorry. So if you recall, last year there was a significant rate increase, and we did that mid-year. Usually those rate adjustments were done at year-end, but we came to the city council and said, given the magnitude of the rate adjustment and the rate increase specifically for disposal, we recommended that rate increase be pushed through earlier than typical. And when we did that, we wanted to make sure that the difference in the rate, the adjustments wouldn't be a fall off on the rate review. So when you got the 7.78, or excuse me, 7.98 for the composite for 2024, we almost hit it to stave off that significant rate adjustment. That being said, there are a lot of changes that are happening in 2025, and these are all of the changes that have to be considered and taken into consideration as far as the rates. And for the last 6 years, I believe, Metro has significantly increased their disposal fees. I think in 2019, the rate was just under 100. Now it's,
at 162. So we had significant rate increases over the years for disposal, for garbage disposal. Organic processing is a small one. It's 2.3%. The union contract, both Waste Management and Pride Disposal have a contract with the Teamsters, and the contract that Pride has an increase this year of 3.10%, and so we adjust that was the amount that we used because they're the bigger the two haulers. CNG fuel, both companies utilize compressed natural gas for the fueling sources, and what's been fantastic for the rates and for the customers is that over the last 6 years, I believe, there's been a federal tax credit that's been paid to both companies to utilize compressed natural gas. This year, that credit expired, and when I was looking at the numbers, that credit's based on the gasoline gallon equivalent per unit, and so that significantly decreased the cost being paid by both companies. Well, that expires in 2025, and so we're seeing a significant increase in compressed natural gas, the cost. That being said, it's still significantly less than diesel fuel powered trucks. So even though we're seeing an increase of that this year, that cost to run a compressed natural gas truck is still significantly lower than a diesel powered truck. Administrative labor and medical costs around 4%, and the franchise fee was increased by 4% to adjust for the revenue increase this year. And then recycling has decreased a little bit this year, and we anticipate it's probably going to come down later on this year to calculation and put that into the expected changes for 2025. So taking all of these changes, next slide please. We anticipate that the overall composite is going to be a little higher this year without any rate adjustments at 8.3%. That being said, since it came in at under 8%, we're going to adjust up to the 10% to make, so that difference at 8.3 to the 10% is what we're asking for tonight. Next slide, please. So as Keith just explained, that the ordinance says that, if it falls within the parameters, here's the steps we take. That being said, this would be effective, what, August? Yeah. August 1st, since we're to give ratepayers the 30-day notice. This rate that we're proposing would be effective August 1st. Next slide, please. And so there's two options available. There's the one where we look at, or we adjust the rates specifically for the residential cart rate, because that's the one that's going to be finishing under 8% of the three services provided, or the other alternative is to apply a blanket 1.9% across all three services. And so the question that we have proposed for City Council tonight is, what option do you prefer? Next slide, please. So this would be the rates right now if we just adjust, or this is the proposed rate increase for commercial and residential cart collection. And again, this would only, the first alternative would only affect customers with a roll cart for garbage collection. And we're looking at, and the most popular service within the city of Tigard is the 32-gallon residential roll cart, which is a 2.6% increase, followed by the 64-gallon cart, which is a 3% increase over the current rates. Next slide, please. Or if there's a blanket CPI or a blanket increase across all three services, this would be the proposed increase, or this is the proposed increase for those for three of the services. So whether it's the 32-gallon or the 60-gallon cart for residential service, it would be 1.9% compared to 2.6 or 3%, and then the container and haul fee would also be increased by 1.92%. Next slide, please. So those are the two rate considerations, and if you have any questions, I can be glad to answer those. If they're technical or specific to operations, we got both the haulers here, and they love to come up and talk with their franchisees.
Thank you. I will open it up the floor to questions. Do you have, Councilor Robbins?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just first a quick question on this last slide, just to make it clear for everyone. Option 1, there's no number there. Can you tell us the percent increase for that one?
Yes, if you go back to
And one more, right there.
Yeah.
So the increase on those cards would be, range from 2.2% to 3.4% for the bigger carts. And the reason the cost increases is because the tipping fee is commensurate with the size of the container. Or excuse me,
And-
the disposal increase, I'm sorry.
And I just want to get into this a little bit because it seems a little, at first for me, it was a little hard to understand. The aggregate rate, if that's the right word, is kind of the rate of both companies combined, how much money they're making. And we want to make sure that each company is only so far away from that aggregate rate, right? The
Correct.
average, I suppose, is a simpler term. And then, so both companies can be profitable. One's not too profitable, one's not less. So it does seem confusing on the face of it as to the different numbers, right, for the different options. And so one option, option one, is increasing the rates for Pride customers. Is that correct?
Well, Pride's got the majority of the residential customers,
yes.
correct.
Mhm.
And so they would see a higher increase.
And that's because the cost of the roll carts is actually, they are the least profitable, I suppose, is the easiest way.
correct.
So we kind of need to boost them up. So it's difficult to understand why increasing the cost for waste management customers would help this, because it would kind of seem like that would be pushing them a little farther away from the aggregate.
Oh, you're correct. You're not that's that's kind of the way the composite lays out. And depending on the different jurisdictions, each jurisdiction may have a different mix of customers. So for example, if you're in Gresham, for example, you've got 5 haulers, right? And there's always one that does really well, there's always one that does not so well, and then you've got 3 that kind of finish in the middle, right? And so it's to the haulers, their objective is to beat the composite. And so if they're looking at, they're trying to do better, they're not competing against themselves, they're competing against that rate. The unique thing in Tigard is, to your question, is where there's a couple places within the Portland metropolitan area that are really, really good if you have a collection franchise and you have commercial. And Tigard's one of them at the mall. Washington Square Mall is a fantastic place to make a lot of money if you're a garbage collector, because there's a lot of customers in a short area and it's really condensed. And so the productivity is high, the can weights are a little bit lower. But that also has a detriment to the overall composite, because they do, because of that demographics and the way it's laid out, they do finish better than Pride. And Pride's got the rest of the area. So there is that disparity. However, that's the nature of the franchise system. There are sometimes there's winners and sometimes there's losers, and sometimes it's just the way that it plays out. Hillsborough has a place like that, the high-tech area, where there's a lot of places like that where that's just the way it is.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And finally, I just want to talk a little bit about the fact that, this rate increase will help the 2 haulers be more profitable, but just this much, right, to get within that goal. But a lot of this increase is coming from outside forces. And one of the numbers in the presentation that I have is that over the past 5 years, from 2020 to 2025, metro fees have increased, I think it was by 65%, which is a 13% annualized increase. That is something that we in Tigard have really no control over, but we can use our voices to get back to Metro and see where these funds are going, what we can do. Perhaps there's nothing that can be done and it's just the way it is, but that in and of itself is an enormous increase that is completely out of our hands, and we've all been feeling this.
I think, as an elected body, I think you have a lot more sway into that discussion than I think a lot of council members understand. And sometimes you've got to be boisterous. You got to be, you got to start asking the questions. Two of the other jurisdictions I work with, both of their mayors are been very vocal about this, and that's the city of Beaverton and the city of Sherwood. And they're asking a lot of questions. And with some of the questions they asked earlier this year, that rate came down from, I think it was 9% they initially proposed, down to 5.58, because the mayor of Beaverton started asking questions and wanted answers. And well, they went back and looked at it and did a reassessment on those costs. So I believe that, you know, as an elected body or as elected council member, you have an opportunity to specifically ask these questions. And it's a partnership, right?
Yep.
So you got to be responsive to your constituents, and the way I look at it is, Metro needs to be responsible to you as an elected body.
I appreciate that, and I don't want to just give up my power. I was more thinking that these perhaps were fixed increases that couldn't go up, but I am more than willing to ask some questions to see what we can do to get some relief for everyone, because it's a big increase.
If you look at the costs associated with the tipping fee, there's a portion of it that's fees and taxes, and that's paid by Metro, and it's paid by every other participant within the system. But Metro also has variable and fixed costs associated with the operation of the transfer station. They have a disposal contract that's pretty rigid, and that's with Waste Management. And if you look at that, there's not a lot of variable in that rate, so there's not a lot of fat to cut in that. Same with the trucking contract. There is not a lot of, it's a pretty lean contract. You got two other pieces of the contract. You got the operation of the transfer station, which is run by Recology, and there's some things that I believe could be done to streamline that operation at both the transfer stations. And then you also have people at Metro, participating within their system. And I think there could be some review of that to see, is that really necessary? Because if you compare what Metro does to the other the private, there's a different methodology, a different way. And I think once you start asking those questions and understanding it, I think that there would kind of be that aha moment, say there's things that we can do to reduce cost and still be responsive to the needs of the region.
Yeah, thank you for this conversation. So this is something that the MMC, the Metropolitan Mayors Consortium, had been discussing at length. I feel like this legislative session has been going on forever, and this was a discussion that took beforehand, and Mayors Beatty and Rosner did take the lead on that discussion for us and sort of took the regional discussion, but we will continue to push back and ask more questions, because I think the mayors do feel that way, that it's something that continues to go up, that we don't have a lot of control over in that direct way, but there are a lot of things just as far as the region is concerned. And I mean, Washington is another state, but Vancouver's drops look very different. And there's many haulers that actually drive all the way down to like Salem and beyond just to be able to tip, because it's so significantly cheaper than actually tipping garbage in the metro area, which is deeply concerning when the metro area is so expensive that people will drive to Salem to dump their trash.
Or Newburgh.
I'm sorry?
Or Newburgh.
Or Newburgh, yeah. They're leaving the area because of the tipping fees on Metro. So we haven't been silent on it, but other mayors did take the lead on that discussion. Council President Wolf?
Thank you, Mayor. And Councilor Robbins did kind of a great job of teeing me up. I have similar questions. Chris, you do a great job, but I think I'm a little disappointed we're back having this conversation.
Yes, I agree.
And I would love to see us get into a CPI process. So what I'm really concerned about is I care a lot about what we're recommending that our community members pay, but I'm worried about the 1.92s not solving a problem in the long run for the concerns that have been defined in the chart. So thank you for all the research and the analysis. So I guess that's kind of my concern and question. If we do 1.92, are we solving the ultimate problem, given the vast percentage of the market in Tigard is residential, are these carts, which will then have a lower rate? And so I guess I'll stop there and ask that question.
Well, if my personal opinion is I set the rate at the cost of service for each line of business. If you've got one hauler over one jurisdiction, and I've worked, there's a couple haulers, and I said, you know, do you want to, one or the other? Their response is usually, whatever city policy does, just as long as we're making our 10% within that, we're fine. But when you have multiple haulers, I look at setting the rate for the cost of service for each individual line of service, whether it's cart, container, or drop box, because in COVID, it was a great example. When you've got this huge disparity and you've got commercial subsidizing residential, at some point, you know, in this case of 2020, that commercial business went away, and then you had you know, haulers saying, listen, you know, I'm upside down on this. So I always prefer to set them at the cost of service for the line of business.
Okay. I think I'm still concerned that we're going to be back having this possible conversation next year. And I guess my request, and maybe this goes City Manager Stockwell or Keith to you and Eric, request, not an expected answer for the evening, but thank you.
Just as a discussion, I think that is a really good point, and I think going back to it and having the discussion about what are the inputs to the cost of that, which include the metro tipping fees and other things, that is a more systematic conversation than just saying this is what's coming at us, this is like the inputs that give us the outputs. So I think we can dive into that a little bit more and maybe even ask Metro to come here and explain to us, help us understand why the tipping fees have gone up so significantly in the last 5 years. We can certainly add that to the list of topics for future discussion. So happy to do that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, Councilor Schlott.
Thank you, Mayor. Earlier this week, we received a letter from the president of Pride Disposal Company referencing that in previous years, what has happened, this is my understanding, this is my first solid waste rates discussion, so excited to be here, but there's still a lot to learn. It sounds like that in previous years, if, for instance, roll carts were under the 8 to 12% range, we would just update that particular line. Is that what you're referring to as line of business?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, yes.
As opposed to uniformly. And I guess I wanted to have a little bit more context as to that practice, because I was not aware of that until I read it, and I don't really understand.
When we looked at when we were reviewing the rates and the costs, I sent Keith the breakout. I think if can we go back a couple slides here? One more, please. Right there. Okay. So when we're looking at the projected composite cost, we're looking at that 8 to 12% range, and if we can get that 8 to 12% range, we're happy. But when we're looking at the projected composite return for 2025 without any rate adjustments whatsoever, we're looking at the cart coming in at 7.2%. And so this increase would get that cart, would set that cart rate up to 10%, and in doing so, we'd be pretty darn close to 10% for the overall composite. And so that would be adjustment just for the cart collection. And that's primarily residential. There are some commercial customers that do have a roll cart, but this is about 95% residents that would be impacted.
Cool. Thank you for that explanation. And, looking at this, I just always think about cost of living for our residents and also just increasing operating costs for our businesses. It's never a happy moment to have to increase these recurring bills for people, even if, looking at the cost, it's, maybe $1 or $2 per week. I mean, that adds up over time for people. And my attitude is if we're complaining about cost of living, we should try and find ways in our own sphere of influence to try and keep cost of living increases down. So that's just sort of, editorializing on my sort of approach towards this. Thank you.
Councilor Shaw?
Thank you very much, and thank you to Councilor Robbins and Schlack for your points, and Council President Wolf, you hit the nail on the head with hopefully looking long-term and having a long-term analysis, because I too was disappointed that we have to be back here. Part of what we've heard from the community is noise, and oftentimes the garbage hauler trucks in the mornings can be quite plowed. And we also have talked as extensively as a council about the environment. And so I want to take the opportunity that I know Pride as a local company has invested into hauling that is electrified and is very quiet. So I think that has answered a number of our community concerns and complaints. So from a quality of life standpoint, I just want to note that I do agree there's been an increase, but I think that's also something that should be applauded.
Well, Counselor, I'm actually, I know Eric is thrilled to hear that because him and Kristen have been beaten up lately about their electric trucks and how expensive they are. So that's actually good to hear.
Hopefully we can work on getting that tax credit for you all as well. Thank you.
These are really great questions. What I haven't heard is any counselors specifically addressed which way they are leaning, I think, as far as the options are concerned. I think just based on the information and helpful additional information from Kristen at Pride, for me, it makes more sense to look at the business lines, which is saying that the roll cart is currently the one that is causing the trouble, and so we should narrow in on that and make sure that that is what we are addressing, not everything overall. So I am in favor of, I think, option one, which is to increase the residential and commercial customers roll cart by the either 2.2% or 3.4%, depending upon what the gallon carts are. And so does anyone feel strongly or disagree or feel strongly that the overall rate adjustment of 1.92% is the way to go? Yeah, Councilor Shack?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have been coming to the same conclusion. I came into this topic when it was first broached with council, leaning more on the 1.92% side of it. But the more I sort of poured over the numbers and sort of considered the information, it seemed like the more elegant solution was the rate increase for that particular line of business specifically, even though that is a higher increase for our residents, but it just seems like the more effective way to address this particular issue at this particular time. So that's my perspective as well.
Councilor Hu?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, that's my conclusion as well. I think they have different model of doing business, right? One has more residential, and my understanding the cost is higher.
Yes.
So I think for a more equitable point of view, I think we should address that. And point to Councilor Shaw's point, they did make some expensive investment, but I think council's goal all have the climate embedded in everything we do, so I think we should continue to support that. But I did have a conversation with the president of Pride Disposal. I did say, in the future, please, make sure you have a rebate first before you invest in heavy EV trucks. But I understand, I bought an EV. It's more expensive than gas car, but I made the choice. But this is not my money; it's taxpayers' money. But overall, I think it's equitable. And to everybody's point, tomorrow, Council President Wolf and Councilor Shaw and I are going to Metro's State of the Region address, and I did submit a question about solid waste rate. I do want them to articulate how their increase, I believe next year's increase is another over 7%, directly benefit Tiger taxpayers. Because it's easy to have this lofty goal of equity and environment, but it's really difficult when our taxpayer or ratepayer open their bill and they don't make the connection. Yeah. My theory is that taxpayer, they don't necessarily oppose to paying more all the time, but we need to do a good job of explaining to them, translate to them how the increase in fees translate into better service. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if Metro is watching, I just have to be honest with you. So far, they have done a very bad job of doing that, to me at least. I just don't know how all those continue increase benefit. I mean, I think my garbage service right now is great. So why am I keeping paying more for what kind of service I'm getting? So, and I also, at the Balloon Festival, I also spoke with Marisa from Metro. I also expressed the same point, and she's very open to coming before the council to do very well, more explanation to us. So yeah, so I definitely support them coming in front of council to ask those tough questions on why they keep increasing their fees. So anyway, that's a long way of saying I support option 1. So thank you.
Okay. Do you feel like you have the guidance that you need for next steps?
I do. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And thank you to our haulers who are both here to take questions that we didn't have for you. The next item on our agenda is the Downtown Parking Management Program update, and we have Community Development Director Kirkman to give the report. Welcome, Sambo.
Good evening, Mayor Lube and councilors. Sambo Kirkman, Community Development Director. We're here again for the Parking Management Program update. Next slide. The purpose of this meeting is to update the council again on the progress of the Parking Management Program as I've committed to doing for you all, and also to get direction from the council with 3 potential options. 1, proceed with the next phase of the program. 2, extend the data collection and notification phase of the program. Or 3, explore alternative methods to address the city parking enforcement. Next slide. So the agenda tonight, we'll go over the project status, talk a bit about the data collected for the month of May, and our next steps, which include the parking survey and also the cost of the project, followed by comments from the third parking forum, and then of course questions and feedback from council. So next slide. So as the status, we brought this to council a few months ago with a modified timeline where we would spend the time collecting data from March through effectively August 31st, with the idea that we'd be doing notification and education between May and June, and then follow up with warnings and citations from July through August. We are finishing up some of the notifications and are currently looking to kind of get guidance from council as to how to proceed July on. So next slide. Okay. So we'll be moving into kind of the parking data collected. Some of you may be more interested than others on the data that we've collected. The focus is really going to be on occupancy of parking areas as well as overstays. Consistently, the data that we see is similar to what we found out in April, where we'll show you some hotspots areas where occupancy gets to the 85% mark, while the overstays show that many of those are going to be for our more parking spaces. So I'll kind of go through the slides quickly, and you can tell me if you'd like to follow up. Next slide. So the next 6 slides are going to discuss the percentages of spaces in use in both districts. Large copies of the information are provided to you, so hopefully it's a little easier to read than the slides here. And of course, 85% occupancy is the threshold in which parking management is recommended. The circles here show where we have the largest number of days of parking that exceeds 85%. But overall, if you look at the first 2 lines, it identifies the downtown and triangle areas, and we really don't have any that exceed the 85% occupancy rate. Next slide. This is a visual more of the same information that you saw on the table. It's kind of a calendar, so you get an idea of the trends. What spaces, what areas that you're seeing consistently with the 85% utilization, and the days of the week in which you would see more of the parking areas as well. So we thought this was just kind of a nice way to kind of capture how it looks consistently over the days of the week. We highlighted May 22nd because that was the Wine Walk Day, which is why you will see more parking areas affected by the 85% rate. Next slide. This is just basically identifies the information on peak occupancy dates, with red identifying where the areas exceed 85% and the green being 55. Again, identifying what we've consistently seen, which is the southern portion of Main Street tends to have the higher occupancy areas as opposed to the northern, and same with Burnham as well. Next slide. Dartmouth here identifies, the triangle area identifies the corner of Dartmouth and 72nd as being the hotspot area. Next slide. This is just more in context. This is the wine walk. And again, with the wine walk, you can see there are definitely areas where you have a larger number of parking areas. However, there are still green areas that identifies that in the downtown area, there is still significant areas available for parking. It's a matter of its close proximity to certain businesses and all. Next slide. Same thing again, one of our peak dates. What you're seeing here again is that even on Dartmouth, on the corner of 72nd and Dartmouth, it's the 72nd area that has the higher hotspot areas as opposed to along Dartmouth itself. Next slide. Now we're going to go into the overstays. This slide here, the next 4 slides are going to show you how our overstay data has come out for the month of May. In this one here, we wanted to identify the average daily number of overstays for the month of May, which shows about 41 cars. Of those 41 cars, 92% of the overstays were 4 hours or more. And again, this is slightly different than the prior month of April, where we gave you our data in a way that I think was a little more confusing. So we figured we'd at least show it in a more comprehensive way. I will say that for April, we had an average of 33 vehicles as opposed to the 41 for this month. So you're seeing a slight tick up of overstays in the area. But if you're doing a comparison between April and May, downtown had 10% for April and 13% for May. And for the Triangle specifically, it was 39% for May, up from 33% in April. So there's a slight tick up as we are seeing the warmer weather. Okay, next slide. This one is a map showing you the hotspot of overstays. This is a suggestion that was made from one of our attendees of the third forum that they thought would be helpful for council to kind of understand where the key overstay areas are. And again, you're seeing what is consistent is I should say actually it's not the south, but the west side of Main Street is where you'll see some of it, as well as some parts near Burnham. Next slide. Same thing here, overstays are around closer to the corner of Dartmouth and 72nd. Next slide. This here is showing you the multiple overstays, meaning that these are individual, each block is an individual car, and this kind of identifies how often that they're overstaying in the restricted areas for the month of May. So there are 18 vehicles who've overstayed 10 days or more within the project area. And what's important about this information,
I just wanted to ask a question on the overstays. Do we have information on if they're overstays during the day or overstays like overnight sort of a thing? Just trying to parse out, like, are these employees or are these people who live there?
Well, the overstays here, we have data from basically from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. because that's when our parking restrictions are. So it's a little harder to parse out if it's specifically employees or if it's residences. However, I think for us, the key component and what we've heard from businesses is that if the purpose of the parking management is to address the businesses, this does tell us that we are seeing it's either residences or
employees.
Employees. Thank you. I was trying to think of the word.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So next slide. So the next series of slides are basically the next steps that we had identified as part of the original plan. Because in the original plan, we were looking at starting citations and as well as starting the warning program as well as citations starting in September 1st. So with that, I'll ask you to go to the next slide. We started trying to capture data from what again we heard from our other forum is that an interest in seeing the customer's perspective. And so we put out a parking survey in which we got 10 comments back, and happy to share that. But again, just trying to address some of the concerns that the business community has, as in how does it affect their actual customers that are coming into the downtown and Triangle areas. Next slide. This here is the updated time limit signs that we had. We had already agreed I believe the council had already agreed that we would extend the additional hour to 7 p.m. and to include Saturdays. So there is a need for us to change the signs. This is what we are we wanted to make sure we informed the community of what the signs look like. And again, it's on only existing 2-hour limited spaces. Just to alleviate some of the concerns of those on Beveland, we are not looking at adding new time-restricted areas. The program has really been about addressing what does the data say about the existing areas, and areas have 4-hour spaces as well. So just to kind of clarify that. What we're hoping is that the team plans to proceed with the creation of these new signs unless the council has questions with the current limits on both districts. So that's something I'll follow up with you as well. Next slide. Again, trying to be pretty.
Thank you. I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
Oh,
about the signs in both districts?
Yes. So we are replacing existing 2-hour signs with those signs that we've identified. And so we are just, again, informing the community of that, and as well as the council. And if the council had chosen to say, okay, we want to do 4-hour time limits instead, we'll probably want to reconsider starting that. And so I just wanted to make time limits instead, we'll probably want to reconsider starting that. And so I just wanted to make sure we're all aware of timelines involved. So if the council is good with it, we'll move forward and we'll start looking at installation of these signs in September and August of this year.
Maybe not
Good.
a question, but I'd just like to raise a question at the end of your presentation about that.
Okay, oh, perfect.
Okay.
The next one is warning tickets. Again, just to be transparent, we wanted to be able to give the community an idea of what they would be expecting during the warning phase, which was supposed to be from July through August 31st. We worked with our design and communications team on putting together what we thought was important, which was to design a warning ticket, or warning, I shouldn't say ticket, but a warning pamphlet that doesn't look like a standard citation, but provided information for people to know what to expect if we were to proceed with actual enforcement. And so this is what was the sample that we gave to community members that were at our third forum. So again, if we do proceed with a current timeline and the current options, we would be looking at starting this around July 1st. Next slide. One of the questions that came up was estimated costs. This is a little harder to identify just because there are so many fluctuating factors here. So what we did was we identified what the current parking enforcement costs would be with what we think are the administrative costs for the adjudication and collections and the technology implications. And then what we looked at was what we estimated was the potential revenue. This revenue is based on the 41 cars that we identified for the month and factor that in. So one of the things to consider is that we are factoring these cost calculations and revenue are based off of what we don't know right now, which is we haven't been doing citations. And so with that in mind, we took a look at Beaverton and saw that for Beaverton, when they started their program, also a program in which they do time restrictions, but they don't charge for the spots. Between 2023 and 2024, there was a drop of about 16 to 19% of the citations from their Q3 to Q4, which is the start, what seems to be the start. So what basically looks like what happens within a year's difference of actual enforcement. Next slide. Okay. Comments from the forum. So we did have our third forum. We had 7 people attend, and these were some of the items that got brought up and things that we wanted to, of course, address in the presentation as well. Costs associated with enforcement. They asked about focused enforcement, which really had to do with could we look at one location over a specific location like the Triangle and not downtown. Our response back to that is that there is kind of a general base cost to this. And so if we were to look at just doing a specific location or a specific time, understand that there's still the base cost to doing the actual enforcement. Extending time limits, that was another thing that was brought up. We did discuss that a little bit because when looking at the 4-hour time limits, one of the original comments that was raised was that if we were looking at a 4-hour time limit, that reduces your enforcement window or your turnover time to basically noon to 3 p.m. Because if you were to park there at, say, 8 o'clock, you would be, or overnight, then you would be able to stay until noon. And if you were to, say, park there at 3, you would be able to stay through to the next morning, or possibly till noon, depending on when the enforcement was there. So those were factors that we took into consideration and did not look at including additional 4-hour time limits. Of course, there were conversations about impact to businesses. There were some comments raised about some of the Main Street improvements. We did identify that the additional public lots were placed as a way to replace some of the existing on-street parking that was lost. And then, of course, the improved overstay maps, which we showed in our presentation. We did get some comments from the council did receive some comments from the chamber as well, and I think we can discuss that if need be. So next slide. Project timeline. Again, here is the project timeline that we had discussed, where we would look at doing the warnings from July through August, and then come back to the council in August to report back again on more data. I realize that it may be a little repetitive, but our hope is that we're trying to provide you as well as the community with as much data as we can, as that was one of the key points that was raised. So with that, I go to the next slide. We are to the question and feedback portion, which is how would the council like us to proceed? Option 1 allows us to proceed forward with the next phase, which again is the actual warnings and then the actual citations. The second option is to extend the data collection and notification. If the council felt that there was a need for additional time, that we would that could allow us to extend it from July to September 1st before we started warnings, and then look at citations starting November 1st. The third option, to explore alternative methods to address city parking enforcement, this allows us the opportunity to still collect data through the summer. I would recommend looking at continuing data collection at least till September 1st, so that way we can capture what the summer months, which tends to be busier here, and what the impacts to both downtown and Triangle are. But then it allows us to maybe pause the program and allow us to do things as, again, look at more engagement. In the data that we provided, we've had meetings where we've had 10, maybe 15, sometimes 20 people that have showed up to these meetings. And I don't know if we've actually captured the true needs of the downtown, both for the residences and the businesses. So being able to have the opportunity to explore alternatives through some of our engagement in the TSP updates that we're about to do. We're about to do our economic development strategy, which again would be a helpful opportunity for us to bring in our businesses to talk not only about what they see for retention and growth, but also for the parking, which is a component. And then, of course, our Downtown Reimagine, which we will be coming back to council as well on the discussion. These are just 3 of the opportunities for us to be able to co-create a solution for the parking with our downtown areas, and also gives us a chance to look at other options, as well as are there potential for us to look at other parking spaces available, or other opportunities. So at this time, staff would probably recommend that option 3 would be the best solution, especially based on the comments that we've received. Okay. So with that, next slide, I can take questions and comments.
Thank you, Sambo. Councilor Shaw, you had a question?
Great. Thank you so much, Community Development Director Kirkland. That was, I think, years into a very quick presentation, and thank you for all the work you've done in the data collection. A quick question I did have is on the updated parking time limits and new signs that would be installed, what cost would that be? And does it make sense to do that now, or should we wait until we're looking at a greater discussion, more alternatives, whether it's going to be 4-hour or shuttle or valets or what have you, and integrate and fold it into an economic development plan? And if that takes, that's going to take too long in order to get these signs done, then we can certainly discuss that, but I'm just curious what the cost would be.
I don't have the identified cost at the moment, but again, that's an option, and something we wanted to be able to present is what to expect if we were to move forward with the current timeline that was, and the timing would be about a couple months for us to be able to construct and install those signs. And it's also dependent on the time of year that we're looking at. It's summer months, and so it takes us a little longer. So we're looking at 2 months out for us to be able to do the full installation.
So if we do option 3, then we're not going to redo the
No.
signs? Okay, great. And then just on the estimated annual cost, just for my mind, so it's $230,000 for the parking enforcement for revenue. That would be about $275. Is that accurate?
I'm sorry. Can you please go
It's
back
on
to slide 20?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Perfect. So just there isn't a total amount, and I just wanted to make
Yes,
sure
it's
since they were
$230.
the same. Okay. Terrific. Thank you very much. I have some comments, but that's the end of my question. Well, I definitely appreciate the request and staff's request to go with option 3. I think that would be a viable option to move forward. To your point of there's other options to look at. We can hear more from the community, perhaps fold it into the economic development plan, which I think is great. And also perhaps a comment. We do know the state has passed minimum parking. We have seen now across all of Oregon that this is causing a huge problem. We are building lots and lots of affordable housing, a lot of apartment buildings, townhouses, duplexes that do not have parking and have no viable transportation system. And so I think we need to actually look at that as a city as we move forward, and because we are creating problems for future councils and more future councils. And I'd love to see us take that on as well to see how we can reduce the amount of unanticipated friction that has caused our communities. So, thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Robbins?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much, Community Director. Oh, so hard, Community Development Director Kirkman. I really appreciate your presentation, and especially you talk so fast, I had to really pay attention.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
No,
tend to do that
it's good,
sometimes.
it's good, keep me awake. So, the feedback that I've seen, I think you've done a great job with engagement. I think the major stakeholders have probably participated, maybe not some of the residents, but a lot of the businesses have. Everything that I've heard, and so correct me if this is wrong, nobody in downtown has said, I want you to enforce parking limits. Is that correct?
I don't think anyone has specifically said parking enforcement's there, but I think what is the impetus for us to look at enforcement is that there is a concern that there's certain areas in which we can't get there just isn't sufficient parking in front of the businesses themselves.
But right down the street, so you can walk down the street to it. I think that definitely option 3 is the best option. I would like to broaden it a little bit to go away from exploring other, I don't have the slide in front of me, but other options for parking enforcement to perhaps something a little broader about explore alternatives to provide long-term solutions for future parking issues in these 2 regions, because we've studied a lot about parking enforcement. It doesn't really seem like enforcing the parking is going to solve the problem, because most of the time the areas are not at full capacity. You might have to walk a little bit further, but my N of 1 is I've always found a spot within a couple buildings. And so I would like to see us perhaps, so first the slide about the number of multiple overstays with the little bars, that each bar is one individual car. Now I forgot what my question was, but can we reach out to these people? Are these in marked 2-hour spots?
Yes.
So these are people who are parking in a 2-hour spot and choosing to stay much, much longer, right?
They're choosing to exceed the 2 hours, but on multiple days.
Right.
So you may be there for 4 hours for one day, and then 6 hours another, and 3 hours. But it's multiple days in the month of May in
So
which
it's
they're there.
likely, like these people that I'm seeing who are 20 days, 18 days, they are likely employees or residents, not customers, right? And we want to, whereas of course we want to make life easy for employees and residents too, that these downtown strips that we're looking at are supposed to be, like the goal of this is to benefit downtown businesses. And so I would like to see, if it's possible, if we could have our community police officer perhaps reach out to some of these parkers and say, hey, did you know that you're parking in a 2-hour spot and you've done it for 20 days this month and you're really not supposed to do that? Because sometimes that personal outreach might get someone to not park there anymore.
We can approach it with our community resource officer. But
Yeah, absolutely.
I will point out that part of the reason that this program was placed in community development was an understanding that our officers, with limited resources they have and other larger issues to address.
Sure.
The ask was that our
We do it.
department look at a way to be able to offset the use of our officers in that manner.
Okay.
And so the businesses have indicated the opportunity to maybe self-manage some of that, and there's the opportunity for us to look at other solutions. But I'd want to explore, because I think the hard part about this program has been that the best way for me to describe it is there's a spectrum of need. There are those that need the parking spaces and those that need them for different reasons. And so this option 3 gives us the opportunity to have the discussion. I know that we've had comments about what is our long-term parking strategy. I find that it's a difficult question to answer because parking is just one element of the strategic look at downtown or the Triangle area. So if we were to look at parking, I don't think it's separate from the rest of the conversation of what does the units look like, because as the comments came in, the strategic plan for 5 years or 10 years is going to look different. The 85% mark is the mark that we want to look at, where we will want us to have that discussion of is it paid parking, is it metered parking? There are other options and ways I think that we would need to bring in our businesses to have that conversation so that they're aware, because again, we get competing comments often. It's we don't get enough turnover or at certain areas. However, but how do we handle employee parking? And again, it's one of the growing pains of success, where if we are going to have the kind of activity that's downtown, it does mean bringing more people in, and it does mean that for some it will require us to look at the turnover. But are there ways that we can manage it in a respectful tone for businesses who are dependent on those spaces and don't want their customers to feel like they're shied away?
Right.
So.
Well, thank you. I just one last thing. I would advocate for, with the budget the way it is, we all just made cuts in all departments. At this point, I would advocate for, if we can, and save money if we can end the contract early, cease with the data collection at this point, because I realize it's not a full season and we don't have the summer, but at this point, I think we're getting enough feedback that perhaps, and forgive me if I'm overstepping, but I think that enforcing 2-hour parking at this point is not really a great option. So collecting that data, I think, is not a useful use of your time and money if we can cancel that. But I don't know all the details, and you do. So.
We can explore options with our contracts with our parking ambassadors to confirm what we can do. It really is kind of a better. I'm looking for a sense of what the council wants us to do. If the data is important, we have the contracts available, and we've set the funds aside for it. If it's not, then that's a conversation we could have with our parking enforcement company and see where we can limit it. It could be, again, I think it's where we're trying to be agile enough to address everybody's concerns. We do still have community members that are out there asking, well, what does the data say? And so there is some benefit to being able to look at the busier months to identify what it looks like, especially as we start seeing new businesses come in and also just the activities down in Universal Plaza, which we love to have that activity. And that just might be valuable information.
Councilor Hu?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I may be asking the same question but different ways. So to me, fundamentally, you say there are so many different needs. So to me, it's hard for me to understand what problem we're trying to solve. So I totally support pausing the enforcement or warning, but if we're going to continue the study, I guess I broke my own rule when I think about having new rules or regulation. Before we do that, the first thing we need to do is to ask ourselves, what problem are we trying to solve? And right now, there are so many different competing needs, so I really don't know what problem we are trying to solve. When I first got on council, a downtown business owner came to me telling me, oh, we need to enforce parking. And now this same person is very vocal about against parking enforcement. So I was like, what the heck? What do you want me to do? It's like, tell us. So my request is that if we're gonna continue studying, please, like writing a US Supreme Court brief, the first thing is issue. What's the issue we're trying to solve? So that will help us focus on our solution. Because right now, it just seems like it's all over the place. So I don't really know myself what issue we're trying to address. And so that's my request. And I think continuing data collection, at least through summer, sorry, Councilor Robin, I think that's a good idea because I just like more data myself. And one last comment is that prompted me when one of our commentator mentioned disabled person. I just want to point out that our municipal code 10.28.190 saying that a disabled person, if they park over the parking time limit, they will not be fined. So, and also if a disabled person park in well, I don't think any place will have meter parking yet, but if they park a meter parking area without paying, they will not be fined. So our municipal code properly take care of disabled people. So I just want to put that out there. So
that's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So that's my only request. I completely support pausing everything, but if we're going to go down this road to do more study, please tell me what the issue we're trying to solve. So thank you so much.
Sure. Just disabled people who have a disabled parking permit, not the people who are going to the acupuncturist or the chiropractor because their back is really hurting. And it's actually kind of difficult to get those disabled parking permits. So whereas I think that's a good thing to point out, but it's not necessarily helping those people who can't walk very far, or maybe, you know, after having a baby couldn't walk, but doesn't have a disabled parking permit. So.
Thank you, and maybe that's something we can put down. That's the issue. So, and also, you know, when I look at this parking thing, I look at the sorry, this is a little. I look at bike parking. It's actually automatic fine if I park my bike on a sidewalk, but sometimes a building doesn't have a bike parking, so now I'm violating. My bike is subject to fine. So anyway. I'm done. Anyway.
But I think you also bring up a really good point of what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and it's complicated because it's multifaceted. It is ensuring that there is the turnover happening in our downtown businesses to support the businesses who want to stay there and want to have customers. But it is also ensuring that residents have somewhere to park that is a reasonable distance from where they live, and employees also have a reasonable place to park where they don't feel unsafe if they're walking at night. So I think the fundamental answer is making sure that there is enough turnover to support the businesses down there, but also those issues, the caveats with the two groups, which quite honestly are direct and indirect conflict with that, right? Like an employee parking in front of a business is great for the employee working at the business, not so great for the business turnover to be able to service that business. And so what we're hearing is a lot of different interests having wildly conflicting statements because their interests are different, which requires a different solution for each of them. So I think it's our responsibility to take all of that information and then lay the policy for for the work forward. But it's, I mean, if it was answered, I think maybe we would have answered it 15, 20 years ago, that this conversation would have been solved. But there's just that tension between all of those groups, and not enough parking downtown is what the rub is, especially when safety or the ability to get and walk comes into play.
I'm going to put aside that the defining enough parking is the hard part too, because if you're looking at our data, the question asked in front of us 6-7 months ago was, what does the data say? And the data is telling us that there are hotspots, but overall there is available parking. What does it look like for the future as we look at more active areas? Like, my hope for the chamber and today is that we do get a full vacancy in our downtown areas, and it does mean that we're going to probably have to have this conversation. So my ask as we look at option 3 is that it's a matter of, it's going to take time, and it's going to be unfolding quite a bit of different conversations, and it means incorporating these conversations into multiple projects and programs that we're talking about right now.
Thank you. Councilor Gadusi?
Thank you, Mayor. A few things. I know I have been very outspoken about how I feel about consultants overall, so anything that we can end up getting out of would be great. Just the cost ends up staggering with what they wanted, both with city center parking and then with implementation overall. I do feel that enforcement will dissuade people from spending time in our businesses and apparently doesn't have significant financial impact for the city. And given the utilization rates that we're looking at, it seems like we're looking for a problem that's not necessarily there. The 70 to 80% occupancy rate overall within those districts ends up being appropriate and actually optimal. So I agree with sort of going down Route 3 and looking forward and expanding those opportunities.
Councilor Stein?
Thank you, Mayor. I know parking is a very exciting topic that we've been dealing with over the last 6 months, and I think it's appropriate that we continue it with option 3. I support having a more holistic look into parking in the downtown and triangle areas as part of our downtown reimagined plan, as part of our long-term economic development plan, as you mentioned. So I think that makes total sense to fold it into that council goal. My impression walking into this issue, I think December of last year was the first time I really encountered it, is that we've been on and off been trying to figure out what we want from parking, and the initial issues that we were probably trying to face 15 years ago are very different now, and it feels like we've been trying to sort of implement a bunch of point solutions as opposed to having that sort of big picture, holistic look of what we want our parking situation to be. So I fully support option 3. I also really appreciate Councilor Shaw's suggestion to have a broader discussion about parking needs in Tigard more generally. I'm thinking about how we have River Terrace 2.0's transportation plan coming up. As someone who lives in River Terrace 1.0 in a higher density area, there is no street parking anywhere except on some of the main arterial roads. So I know it makes garbage day very interesting on my street, trying to see how we can all fit everything in. So I think it's, I appreciate Councilor Shaw mentioning that, because I think that is a broader discussion that we should have, especially if we're wanting to increase housing density. And to Councilor Hu's point about what the problem is, for me, when this was presented to me back in December, I've always interpreted this as a turnover problem. I appreciate all the looks at occupancy, but for me, the key numbers were what you touched upon earlier, that in the downtown area, the average overstay rate for April was 10%, and for May it was 13%, I believe is what you said, and then for the triangle, it was 33% in April, and in May it was 39%. At least for the downtown area, I look at those numbers and I think there's not a turnover problem there based on those particular numbers, or if there is, it's not enough for us to proceed in the way we were planning to. And I feel like the triangle needs it to be handled differently, because it is a smaller amount of parking spaces that we're ultimately looking at, and needs to probably be handled in a different way. So for me, I've always looked at it as a turnover problem, and based on those numbers that you presented, I think we need to rethink what the problem is. So appreciate that, and I fully support gathering more data, as I don't think anyone is surprised to hear. I mean, I was so excited when I got this on my desk today, when there's a 8.5 by 14 inch piece of paper in color. I mean, that's fun stuff. These charts are incredible. Especially looking at the wine walk in particular, it's just really interesting to back up the qualitative feedback we've heard from business owners with the actual data about how we're seeing folks actually park in the downtown and the triangle areas. And it sort of goes back to what I mentioned earlier. We've had 15 years of sort of qualitative feedback of single day studies where we did counts and people saying, oh, those days are not representative of what we see year round. And now we're really developing a 4 to 6 month period across multiple seasons, across different types of weather, different types of large scale events where we can say, this is actually post-pandemic, this is what our parking situation looks like. Let's use this as our baseline of what the situation is, and then we can incorporate that into option 3 and some of those more holistic plans. So I know I have a tendency to talk a lot, but like I said, this just really excited me this evening, so I had a lot to say. Thank you all.
Council President Wolf.
Going to go super fast. 3 things, and the mayor, we've all recapped. I mean, if you look at explanation of the issue on the agenda sheet, it's about downtown businesses asking for a need, and we've heard from multiple of them that we're not there yet. So I support option 3. The data, I'm really indifferent. I think capturing the wine walk was brilliant, and I think summer's going to just reinforce what we already know. It's going to be that push-out bleed of where do cars go when that those hotspots are full. So I'm just going to say I'm indifferent because I think we're just going to reinforce probably what we know. And then the last thing, the process and the information you've provided has been wonderful, but some feedback I did get is the timing of notice for meetings, just to make sure that it's extended so that people can really plan for that, get it on their calendar, or make sure the employees they want there can be present. So that would be my request, is just to make sure that there's a pretty good runway on getting that information out. So that's all I have. So thank you. Great work. Thank you.
Thank you. I support option 3 with continuing to gather the data. I think the data is helpful and important, even if it reinforces, I think, what we already know, saying that we knew the entire season, here's what happened during the summer, which is our busiest time in downtown Tigard, is really important information. But to continue to figure out, and creative ways, we are doing wayfinding for kind of the trails and stuff downtown. Maybe part of the solution is wayfinding and indications of, like, there's parking down here, like this is where you go if you're looking for additional parking, because maybe people don't know that it's just a little bit farther away. So maybe that is one of the solutions as well, is making sure, because I've been in that situation too, where you're looking at a map, circling around, trying to figure out where the parking is, and maybe if there was a better sign, who knows? But so generally, who is in, because I sort of heard a mix of both. I think 3 is universally the way to go, but whether or not more data collection. If you support continuing, I think you've got your majority of continuing support for the data collection through the summer.
One last question. Do you all want an update on the data once we have it, or would just a city manager update to you all work?
I
don't want
think
to
because we've
inundate
had
you all
such a
with it.
public conversation, I think maybe at the end of summer, coming back and wrapping up and letting us know about the trends of what you have seen and heard, and the data and what the data says is probably the way to go. I don't know that we need a continuous monthly update at this point. Councilor Shaw?
Thank you, Mayor. I also liked Council Robbins' suggestion of changing the wording from explore alternative methods to address city parking enforcement, because it's larger than that. I'm not sure if we have the exact words to capture, but I did like that concept.
Addressing future parking needs.
How about city parking management? Yeah, we could do that.
Any additional comments? Do you have one? City Manager Stockholm?
I was just thinking it might be helpful to go back to that last slide.
Oh, okay.
Because we were still on this, so you can see what that direction was. Yeah, so explore alternative methods to address city parking management instead of enforcement might get to some of what you said.
Management or need? Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, and I really appreciate Community Development Director Kirkman and her work on that. She was talking fast because I told her to keep it short, and that was a lot of pressure, so because there's a lot of good information there, and I know you love data. there are a lot of problems, a lot of different problems that we're trying to solve here, and we want to be very cautious that we don't go through a one-size-fits-all solution that actually makes challenges worse. So we appreciate the flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all of your work, and thank you to the business owners who are here today joining us. We appreciate your participation and your feedback. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of council ground rules resolution, and we have the city attorney to introduce the item.
Thank you, council. So hopefully this is third time's the charm. This will be the third time this is before council. At your last meeting, you gave direction specifically regarding the non-agenda items. So the document before you tonight has a proposal for those. Additionally, we realized there was a typo in the first, under Code of Conduct, Section 2, subsection 9. Follow the city's generally applicable, it should say generally applicable policies, not generally acceptable. Though they are very acceptable also.
It sounds like acceptable practices, like accounting.
So with that change, I'll open it to council. I'm here to take guidance on it.
City Manager
Yeah, Mayor
Stockwell?
and council, if I could, a little bit more. This generally applicable policy gets to something that I've identified in my 24 days here, and that is I think that we could be more clear about those policies that specifically apply to the mayor and council versus those that are broadly applicable to employees and volunteers. In talking with City Attorney Rahala, after your first discussion on this back in January 16th, she had identified some of the policies that are applicable, like the purchasing card, if you have a purchasing card, travel policy if you're traveling, the citywide fringe benefits policy, electronic communication because you have, one of these devices, and then EEO non-discrimination harassment, where that could impact in the workplace, and then respectful workplace. What I'd like to do is spend a little time going through those policies and putting together a package for you of those policies that are directly applicable to mayor and council, because really you all should be approving and aware of and approving those policies that are applicable to you, or at least being aware of it, because otherwise you put me in kind of a difficult position, because I'm the one doing all the administrative regulations and policies, but then I have to then enforce something on my bosses, the city council. So I want to make sure that you're aware of those, and it's easier to comply with things if you're aware of what you're expected to comply with. So I wanted to make sure that was clear, and then I'm also hopeful that the non-agenda items that I committed to work on and put in here, my philosophy around regulations and policies is to do the minimum effective dose. Don't want to over-regulate, and so the language is pretty clear there. It still gives us some flexibility during the meeting to handle things that come up, and my commitment to each of you is that I will work with each of you to accommodate the types of things that need to be addressed by the city council. So I appreciate your trust on that, and we'll keep the open lines of communication so that we can help these meetings be as effective as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. So the recommended change is the word from acceptable to applicable. Are there any additional questions or comments? Yeah, Councilor Schlack?
So Section 2, Code of Conduct, line 8. If we were to read this aloud, we would be saying, to that end, we don't intentionally surprise each other. I'd like to suggest that we strike we don't and replace it with do not. So that way it's grammatically in keeping with the rest of the Code of Conduct.
Any objections to that from anybody? No? Okay. Any additional comments? Yeah, Councilor Shaw?
So just for clarification, City Manager, are you saying that those additional items would be put into the ground rules and we should not be passing this tonight? And there will be, or just an addendum to it?
No, I'm saying that as a follow-up to your approval of this, there's a clarification that needs to be made to make sure that you are all aware of what we would see to be generally applicable policies, and then if there's any further discussion on that, then we can agendize that specifically for that discussion later. Thank you.
And then I do have one comment, and I know we have spent quite a bit of time on ground rules, and so if my just stating this on the record instead of actually changing it in the text, I'm fine with. But if we go to under boards and committees, the interviews here, and again, just happy to verbally state it, that we had agreed that a counselor could ask a question, and it doesn't state that. And then in the third bullet, it makes this assumption that the recommendation is by both the mayor, the counselors, and the staff. And technically, it would be just the mayor. So again, we don't have to change it, but I would like it on the record, so if there's any confusion moving forward, there was concern mentioned. Yes, so in 1, 2, or 3 doesn't say that in addition the mayor's questions, like when we talked about last time, that a counselor could ask a question, it could be one of the mayor's questions. And again, that may be too pedantic to put in there. And then the third bullet, it says the mayor will provide the council with a list of selected applicants along with their applications, the interview notes, and the recommendations summarizing why the applicant was chosen. To me, that makes it sound like it was a consensus among all 3 when it really is just the mayor's recommendation. So how do I make that more specific?
I don't read it that way. Does anybody else read it that way? You can turn your mic on. Yeah.
Yeah, I see where Councilor Shaw is coming from on it, and I think I don't know. I think it sort of comes down to what we're used to versus what is specifically written, because I know we've sort of gone back and forth about how we all seem to understand the mayor's role as being to make the recommendation, and then it's the council's role to review and consider approval of said recommendation. And the purpose of making sure the council was involved was so that way the council could do its job of reviewing and having the information it felt was necessary in order to make those decisions. So that's sort of my mindset looking at it. But I think point 1, the mayor will lead the interview process for public board and committee applicants is fairly straightforward. I wouldn't be against adding an additional line clarifying that the mayor makes the recommendation and will provide the council with this information, just to be very clear that that recommendation is originating from the mayor if that is what the council wants to be done.
I will just say in the charter, is that what you were going to address, Shelby? I mean, I feel like in the charter it makes it very, very clear, and so I don't know. I mean, the charter supersedes the ground rules.
So I was going to say that under B1, it does specifically say the mayor's recommendation for appointments. So I would say the document is clear that it is the mayor's recommendation.
Yeah, I saw that. I wasn't sure if it meant all boards and committees, but I'm happy to live with that as long as we know B speaks to A, 1, 2, and 3, then I'm fine with that.
Councilor Schleck?
Thank you. And to the point of raising board and committees, I know that the mayor and council president have been interviewing and identifying a good candidate for our next youth counselor, which is not a board or a committee, but is also an appointment process. And I'm wondering if that's something that we should consider addressing as part of the ground rules, as opposed to potentially reconsidering with maybe another look at the resolution to be clear about how that process works. Just because I'm trying to think of other appointments, and pretty much all of them come up in boards and committees except for the youth counselor, which is, it's an add-on to this governing body, which is not a board and committee. So anyway, you all see where I'm going with this.
Yeah, no, and so it's in the resolution. the process of why it's there, how long they're there for, what are the qualifications, and how they're appointed. I think generally, I think we should have a more robust conversation on the youth counselor. And so my recommendation, rather than piecemealing it out here, is to keep the youth like everything having to do with the youth counselor in that one resolution. So I think we're gonna start to maybe talk about it. Well, I will say, my hope is that we talk about it maybe in the fall and not during the appointment process of the individual that we're bringing forward, because I think those are two separate issues that, although related, probably not appropriately discussed next to each other. So we will bring it back later on this fall to have a history lesson and an understanding and some more background. Yeah, Councilor Shaw, did you have a question?
I do. Well, one, thank you for that conversation. I appreciate the youth counselor being brought up, and thank you, Mayor, for having the discussion later in the fall. And I know I believe it's on Thursday, there's going to be some interviews for the boards and committees. I assume it was just a timing issue, and that in the future, we're asking our business community and our staff to give more notice to our businesses and to community members for meetings, and I would hope that we also get the same courtesy and have more time if there's going to be board and committee interviews than just 2-day notice. And I understand why it was this week, but just in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor and Councilor Shaw, that's exactly correct. It was just a timing issue. And so our intent is, so Corinne will let the full council know of when the interviews are scheduled. We'll get 2 members to do that. And we're going to try administratively to balance that out over time. To make sure everyone has a chance to participate when they're available. So, thank you.
Councilor Kim?
Thank you, Mayor. This is so long. We've been doing this so long, and there's many back and forth. So I just want to, for my own understanding, of exactly the reason that we are taking away the voting to adjournment. What's the reason for that? Can anybody just say it for the public? And
Sure. So after the Oregon Government Ethics Commission training, it was pointed out that all voice votes need to have names attached to it. So, in other words, a roll call vote, or the mayor needs to indicate that who votes in the negative. So the mayor and I discussed, and under Robert's rules, the options are a vote to adjourn, or the presiding officer can adjourn after completion of all the items. So in order to eliminate the need to do a voice vote, every time we were going to adjourn, the mayor made the decision that it would be easier to just have the chair adjourn. So it was really to expedite the end of the meeting and not require a voice vote that would require a name attached to each vote to comply with our meetings laws around minutes.
okay. I think I would not have any concern if the non-agenda item, which will be on the agenda going forward, will be brought up earlier in like what we used to do before, like right away, rather than at the end. If that's what, I don't have to be right, doesn't have to be written down, but I just, like Councilor Shaw, I just want to get a record that this is consensus that non-agenda item will be one of the first items at each meeting. Is that?
So Mayor, Councilor Hu, so with the ground rules as amended tonight, approved, it does say in 6E that the non-agenda item on the council regular agenda, and it goes on to talk about that. So that presumes that there will be a non-agenda item on that. We'll include that in there. And as City Attorney Rahala just said, the mayor's ability to adjourn the meeting after all the items are completed means all the items on the agenda have been completed. So I think that takes care of it.
Okay. And while we're on 6E, can somebody define me what housekeeping mean? I don't really understand.
Well, I hate to put the city recorder on the spot, but I'm going to, because she gave me a really good explanation of how that had been historically used. Carol, would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, sometimes things come up where we need to apply for a grant, a deadline's coming up, it didn't get on the agenda earlier, and we need to act. So it's just it's a non-controversial, but just something we need to take care of in a timely manner. Or maybe, maybe the legislature is asking us to do something, to write a letter or weigh in, and you need to talk about doing that. So things like that, things that come up that need.
Thank you. That was just a clarification.
Can you turn your mic on?
We go farther back in the past.
Can you turn your mic on, please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thought I did. So thank you for that explanation. That was just intended to be an explanation of how that non-agenda item had been used historically. It is kind of a unique thing to have a non-agenda item on the agenda, but one of the things in the Oregon Public Meetings Law and the opinions and everything around that is it gives you some flexibility to discuss items that aren't on the agenda. And so what item 6 does now is it says as the kind of the main way of doing things, if any of you have an item you want on the discussion, on the agenda, you bring that to me, and then we'll follow the process there. If you think of something during a meeting and you want to bring it up at the non-agenda items, we're just going to refer it back to that other process, but you can still do that. Does that's how I read 6E. It gives you that flexibility, or if you feel like something hasn't been handled the other way, you could do that. So it gives you flexibility, but it tries to get more of a process here. And again, the public policy in that is to make sure that all of you, plus all the members of the public, have as much advance notice as possible of the items to be discussed on the agenda. Thank you.
If I can clarify that point, so it's not actually a requirement by public meetings law. The meetings law requires that there be a space for it on the agenda. So it is council's decision if it wants to have items specifically listed on its agenda or just have the space to bring that up.
So, and I could be wrong because we haven't personally discussed this, but I'm wondering if one of the questions or one of the concerns might be if, say I had an idea of something I wanted to have on the agenda and I go to you and you disagree. Say, like, I think my dog should be counselor. I'm going to be totally silly so that my dog Arlo should be a new city councilor. And I go to you and you say, we're not going to put that on the agenda or whatever, for whatever. A month has gone by and it hasn't happened and it hasn't happened. And I've gone to you and you've said, no, Heather, Then at that point, I still want it done. And I'm being silly. I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm trying to be as neutral as possible. So then at that point, I could say, I have a non-agenda item. I think my dog should be a city councilor. It's out there. It's on public record. Everyone has seen. So I've got it there. It's not necessarily that we have to talk about it, but I've made it clear to everyone that I want to talk about that, and City Manager Stockwell has been totally stonewalling me and not letting me do it, but I have said it, and now perhaps a different action could be taken to help me feel satisfied, whether it's the other counselor saying, stop this, or, oh, I think we should talk about Arlo being a city councilor. Is that a reasonable use of the non-agenda item, perhaps?
In that complete hypothetical, which I hope never occurs. Yes, I think so, because it says if an item is first raised during non-agenda items, it will be referred to the city manager and follow the process above. That presumes that if it has already followed the process above, that it's got to be dealt with. And we were trying not to overthink or over-regulate this, but I can definitely see a time where there's one member that feels very strongly about having it on, and then we'll put it on, and if it gets a second and the majority wants to do it, the majority does that. What this is also trying to contemplate is that it's giving me direction as well as your kind of chief policy advisor on this of how to do this in most situations. And so what I'm going to do is when I get one, we'll work to get it on the agenda within a month. If all the meetings are full and we go back and I talk to the requesting member and we say, well, can we do it in 6 weeks rather than 4 weeks? And you say, yeah, I completely agree, no problem. Or if we talk about it and there's another method to address that and you agree with that, so the requesting member is agreeing with that, we can handle it that way. And I think that's consistent with the conversation that we had. But ultimately this is giving me, it's your ground rules, but you're giving me direction on how you want me to handle things. And I think it's a good idea to have that all set well in advance of any problem like that. Thank you.
Councilor Schleck?
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd like to just add on to that, the 6A, all voices should have a clear and respectful avenue to be heard during council meetings, I think further reinforces that as an avenue. So thank you.
Councilor Gadusi?
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 25-26 with the proposed grammatical changes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Hu?
So the example about housekeeping that Carol brought up, that just seems like this gives staff an opportunity to surprise us without telling us anything ahead of time, but we cannot do the same. So maybe I'm just overreacting, but that's my interpretation.
Thank you, Councilor Hu. What I will say is, in my 6.5 years, the staff have never used that against us. They do their best to make sure that they're prepared and we're prepared, and the only things that have ever come forward are time-sensitive things that were out of their control that they weren't able to put on beforehand. Like I think even once with us, we passed a letter that we wanted from the council instead of just the mayor. And so perhaps if you feel that something comes up in the future that feels abusive, we can address it then. But I think going back to assuming our good intent of people following the process, the staff abusing it have never been a concern.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but at the same time, I feel like this ground rule is assuming that any council member will abuse the process. But I'm not going to disagree with it. But I'm not going to vote no just because that. But I just have reservation about the definition of housekeeping, and I would rather to have more articulation on this. But I understand we've been doing this for 6 months, so I'm just going to vote yes on this. So, yeah, end of discussion.
Any additional comments? Okay. Seeing none, will the city recorder read the number and title of the resolution?
Resolution, excuse me, number 25-26, a resolution adopting city council ground rules for 2025-2026 with grammatical corrections.
Thank you. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is adopted by unanimous vote of the council. We don't have any executive sessions, and we have completed the agenda, so we are adjourned for the night. Thank you so much. Good night, Tigard.